Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Inclusion Starts Now. I always say I'm so excited, but seriously, I just feel like I interview people who are so amazing. And Ashley Barlow is someone who I've wanted to be on this podcast for a while, and just time has slipped away from us. Ashley is such a huge part of the disabled community, and she will share why in this interview, but she is really like such a mentor. And I am so happy that she came on to talk about what's happening right now with the Department of Education and just politically and what we can really do and not get too overwhelmed by it all. This week, I really want us to think about learning, the importance of educating. And that means not only educating yourself on topics that you really like and want to read, but other topics that like might not be your biggest interest. That is like really where you start pushing your own understanding of the world, of how people work, because we don't want everyone to be the same. That is not what inclusion and diversity is. It's learning to accept all of our differences and find ways for us to all still connect and grow more together. So enjoy this conversation with me and Ashley. Ashley and I, me and Ashley. I'm a teacher and I should know that. Why is that one so hard? Okay, here we go. Whenever I do recordings in the morning, I feel like my voice sounds so much deeper. Like I was sitting here like doing vocal. I was like, like just trying to wake up my voice.
Okay, can I tell you something
If I
before we
sound
start?
tired. Yes.
Well, I don't care if this goes on the recording, but so I like to do hot yoga,
hmm
and there is this instructor that I love who she's just fun. Like she makes yoga fun. What I like about yoga is it is kind of, not perfect. And it's like find your journey, right? And so she like occasionally we dance, she'll play like twist and shout and you twist and shout like as your warm up. And then at the end, she sings to us and she is like an angel, Kayla. Like she
Oh
has the
my
most
gosh.
beautiful voice. And I was telling my best friend about it and how much I love it. And then I said, do you ever notice after hot yoga how you get in the car and like you sing to the music in your car and your voice is better because you're so warm? Like I'm not a singer. And my best friend was like, you should say to your instructor, like, do you ever notice like that your voice sounds better? And I just wanted to know if you like could evaluate my voice before and after class.
No way. Did you?
No, but I'm really
Oh
tempted
my
to because I
gosh.
I just think it would be funny because she's really fun and funny, and I think that
Yeah.
she would get it right away. But if
No,
she didn't,
I can see that because it's like you're warming up and it's warm. Like I'm pretty sure that's the whole point of like warming up, that you're getting warmer. So if you're getting warmer in hot yoga, I could
right?
totally see that.
I mean, the whole point of it might actually be for our voices.
That's it. It's not even for our body or mental health.
No,
It is just so we can all sing better.
in the car.
I need to go back to hot yoga.
Jewel. What I'm really good at is Jewel.
What's that? Is that the type of hot
Like
yoga?
dreams last for
Oh,
so long, even after you're gone. But I know
totally
I'm
was
really
like,
good
oh,
at
a type of hot yoga. Oh my gosh.
it. Well,
I'm not
stick
editing any of that out.
don't like
And
to
you
be
have a beautiful
serious.
voice. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
I knew that you would like that. In college, we used to. Oh, okay. I got to pull up my outline again. In college, um, we had to take buses to all of our date parties and stuff because I went to school in the middle of nowhere. And so I would get on the bus in the front. I sang these songs that I called Ashley Meyer songs. And I would, I would get up in the middle and be like, one of them was Ashley Meyer, oh, walking down the street, Ashley Meyer, and then blah, 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 blah. And then it goes, I can't believe this. It can't be true. No one can look as good as me.
Oh my gosh.
And
I need to start doing that I just call my songs, like I put them in a playlist. So like 2024, they're all the songs that I like to sing to. And so I just put those
Yeah.
on. But I've had people be like, wow, this is just like a one woman show. Like you're just gonna sing every song as loud as you can. I'm like, yeah, it's my playlist. Like
Do you
what?
not know? Like
But
that's the
now
whole
I'm gonna
point.
start putting my name in them
Yeah.
so people know
Yeah.
that I'm also singing about me.
It just really gives you a stronger sense of self to focus so much on oneself and connecting with the music.
Exactly.
Mhm.
I feel like this is our topic is about to so drastically change, but I feel like this is what everyone came for.
Probably. I can't imagine that they would want to know anything else.
No, definitely nothing about what's happening in our political system right now, nothing about educational rights. Um,
Well, everybody
I want to hear another
prioritizes them
Ashley Meyer
differently.
song.
I know. I have to admit, so maybe that's a good place to start, actually.
Yeah.
Well, here's what I think. I think that it is so okay. So, like the overwhelm that we're all feeling, and the overwhelm hit me about a week ago, which is much later than it hit other people. But now I feel like every single time I go to social media, all I'm seeing is about changes to the Department of Ed, the reduction in size in the Department of Ed, changes at the Office of Civil Rights, all of these things. But what I think is really important here, and one of the reasons why I encourage people to really kind of like stay in it to the extent that you can, is because that's intentional. So part of what the Trump administration is doing and intends to do is to overwhelm us such that we stop paying attention. And like right now, they're kind of throwing stuff at us really, really fast, and then what's going to happen is they're going to start chipping away at things. And I'm not saying this as like some conspiracy theory. I'm saying this is like a plan that they have articulated out loud, to start chipping away at things, and also basically like hiding little changes in other laws. And we're so tired that we have to stop paying attention for our own mental health and our own sanity. And then big changes kind of all collectively impact us. So,
Mhm.
a big piece of advice that I have to your listeners, Kayla, is to find a couple of places where you want to get information about the Department of Education, and then only access those. And when you see them in your social media, scroll past them. And when you are up in the middle of the night and you go to NBC News or whatever you do to do whatever you need to do, is you're accessing news, do it very deliberately so that you don't experience that burnout.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. And I've actually started doing that myself, scrolling past certain news sources because I was just like, I feel like you're just trying to scare me with like all this information. And like, I'm gonna go get my information from like some trusted sources. Like when I am like mentally ready to hear that information and then figure out what I want to do um, to keep fighting for uh, like everyone gets like good educational rights.
Yeah.
Which actually, by the way, we did not introduce you at all. And I want to hear resources. Okay, I'm going to write down that. Uh, Ashley, can you give it out a quick introduction of why you are like such a knowledgeable human being for this topic?
Well, I don't know
You are. No, you
why I'm
are.
so knowledgeable. Well, I do know why I'm so knowledgeable. I'm knowledgeable because of like all of my life's experiences. So, which starts really early on. When I was 15 years old, I broke my back in a gasoline explosion and I became physically disabled. And walked through the steps of determining whether or not I wanted or needed a 504 plan. And then I was a teacher, and I taught German education. I also taught at the college level. And then, so I've taught K to from kindergarten through 12th grade and college students. Um, and then after a few years in education, I went to law school, and now I practice primarily in the areas of special education and special needs estate planning. For about the last 10 to 15 years, I've only represented families that have kids with disabilities, or self advocates themselves. with very few exceptions. And then in addition to that, I'm a parent in the disability community. I have a little guy who's not so little anymore, but I'll still call him a little boy, who's 14, who has Down syndrome, my son Jack. So, I see things through the lens of all, basically all people at the IEP table. Um, by way of special education practice, which isn't what we're talking about, but I have this really collaborative approach. And as I think about policy and I talk about policy and I read about policy and kind of like engage in this all encompassing stressful environment now, you'll probably hear some of that like fairness come out. Um, I just believe that we have to look at everything through this lens of reasonability. And I've done a fair amount of federal policy work. I worked really hard on getting ABLE done. With a couple of different national organizations, and then I got ABLE done in my home state of Kentucky. So, I've just kind of taken an interest in politics and policy as well. Um, and I always say, like, leave it to Jack Barlow. I never thought I'd be watching C-SPAN, but I do.
Wow, I did not know that first story. I
Oh,
didn't
you
know
didn't?
about the gas explosion, gas station explosion.
So I was on a wave runner. My parents still have a lake house. And when I was 15, I sat down on our wave runner and did a loop. It had not been working, and so my dad had a repair done to it. And so he was like, just hop on it and see if it starts. And I was circling back around for my life jacket, and it exploded and shot me about 20, 22, 23 feet in the air. Um, and I broke four vertebrae. So I'm actually fresh from PT right now. I've been in PT
Wow.
for the last 30 years, but my son and I were in a car accident in October, and I'm just having a long recovery from
Oh
that.
my gosh.
So yeah, so chronic pain, and I also have I had generalized anxiety disorder, and PTSD kind of took a strong grip of me, and so I have chronic PTSD as well. So, um, I don't necessarily identify as disabled, but technically I qualify as disabled, and I certainly understand long-term mental health conditions and long-term physical conditions, and I have chronic pain and all of that
Yeah.
stuff as
Well, I
well.
remember you posting on your stories recently that like your back kind of just like went out or it was like in so much pain and you couldn't move. And
Yeah, I started watching
yeah,
TV for like the first time in my life. Well, the first time in my adult life. So I'm a TV person now. It's
I'm
like
a TV person.
it's a whole new me.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
You're cracking me up in the areas that I feel like I'm okay. Okay.
You have to be lighthearted when you're talking about things that are this important. I'll tell you what I learned about TV yesterday. My husband,
Yeah.
I'm watching the show Younger, which is
Love it. I know the show, watched it.
it's cute, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
think
I
it's
love
cute.
Sutton. I really wanted to name a child Sutton, and Josh did not like that name, so we did not.
No, I think it's a cute name too. There's
Well, it's like the actor. She's not the
still
character.
time.
But
Yeah.
anyways,
So my husband said, when did that show come out? And I was like, I don't know. Is that something I need to learn? And he said, well, yeah. And I was like, well, I mean, I don't really care, but since I don't watch TV, I need to know, is that something that TV watchers know about their show? And he said, yes. So I had to look it up.
well, I mean, I guess it's like it's interesting to know because if they say certain things, like because if they ever talk about like what's happening in that area of time, or
Hmm.
like I don't know, sometimes it's interesting to watch to be like, wow, look at the devices they're using or the clothes they're wearing, or like I guess
Yeah,
that's interesting. I like to know if it was a book first because I usually like to read the books first, which Younger is a book first. I did not know that until I was like in season two, and I was like, man. Well, I'm not going to read it now. I'm too far in.
same.
But I
Just saw it
usually
on
will
the
like,
opening credits. And I was like, oh, I guess I never really actually look at it. Because I still watch TV while doing other things.
yeah,
I'm
that's
not a very
what
good sitter
my
downer.
husband does that. It's always like he will always have TV on. And it's so confusing to me. Because to me, I'm
Yeah.
like, if I see the TV on, I'm just sitting there like watching it. because I can't seem to separate, especially if it's a good story. Because then I'm like, oh wait, what just happened? Wait, what are they mad about?
Right. Right. Well, I'm not very good at TV. So I can't be like watching TV and doing something else entirely. But like I'm
Yeah,
usually exercising or whatever. But while I have these like waxes and wanes of recovery from the car accident, I've had a few days where I've just had to sit on the couch and do nothing and I'm watching TV.
that sounds nice.
This is
I like
great
it.
avoidance of the current topic at hand.
Yes. Well, okay, let's go back to the topic because I want to know what are there any resources that you feel like are good to learn, like that are
Sure. Yeah,
good is
so
I'm trying to find a better word than good. Reliable, like reliable sources.
yes. So I think, whatever like major news outlet you like. I tend to like NBC News. But whatever news outlet you prefer is probably a good place to start. I also tend to get national news from NPR. Then I actually subscribe to Ed Week. And I think within Ed Week, you can get so many articles for free per month or per week or something. I think Ed Week is an extraordinary place to get information. In addition to that, if you are particularly interested in the disability community, most of your national organizations have a policy arm. So, whether, it's Autism Speaks or IDA or the National Down Syndrome Society, National Down Syndrome Congress, um, you should probably be able to get information from those places. And then I would look within your state governments to see what your states are doing. So, I would look at protection and advocacy, human development institutes, USEDs, which are University Centers for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, and organizations. Oh, your SPIN network is you either have a USED or a SPIN. And look to see, if they're putting out policy updates, if they're putting out stuff, and if they have in the past, then I would expect that they would be. So, following those places on social media, for example, can be a great way to get information.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds great. Um, I know I've definitely been very overwhelmed. Because we're on month 3 and it just feels like every day we're getting some new piece of information and it does feel really overwhelming. And I feel like even after the LA fires, like we talked about how overwhelming mentally it is and emotionally for people who like don't even live there, but
Hmm.
they're watching all these videos of houses burning down and interviews with the families and just like someone was telling me that it's like putting our brain is thinking that it's like happening to us because we're like, getting so much real time information that like it is very overwhelming. And then it could be so overwhelming. Like people are disassociating. People are just like, you know what? I'm just hoping it's not going to be like, it's not going to affect me too much. Like, I don't really know what to do. Um,
Yeah. I mean, that's
and
why I
yeah,
started doing things online. So I post stories on Instagram, and I started a special series on my podcast, which is called the Collaborative IEP Podcast, in order to summarize things because I was going out and getting the information because people were asking me. And then I started to do these summaries because people were like, honestly, it's too overwhelming for me to weed through all the information and all the conflicting accounts and all the different mentalities. And they were coming to me because they do find me to be able to present this information in a fairly, I don't want to say neutral way, but objective way.
hmm
And so that's why I started to do it. I mean, I look at it anyway because it affects me professionally. And one of the examples of how it affects me professionally is in the first few weeks of the administration, of the administration, I had a case that involved where I thought I was going to need to file an Office of Civil Rights complaint. And remember, I can't talk a lot about cases, right, because of
yeah,
confidentiality, but I thought I was going to have to file a complaint within the Department of Ed's Office of Civil Rights. And there was tons of information coming from tons of different places that was indicating that the Office of Civil Rights wasn't really pursuing claims right now. And they maybe weren't even like looking at complaints. And so I had to like completely revamp the way that I was handling this particular case from any way that I would have done it before. And I was contacting special education attorneys. Literally, one in California was the one that said, well, we do this instead. And so I I didn't want to file due process because of the timing involved, and I couldn't file an OCR complaint, and so I actually drafted a state complaint and um, either a tort complaint to be filed either in federal or state court, which are two things I never would have filed in that case, right? And
Yeah.
so, from my perspective, it's really important that we stay abreast of these things because they really help us to make decisions in actual real life cases right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, and I have not listened to your new podcast episodes where you're summarizing these things. So I feel like I'm gonna put that in the show notes, your podcast, but I'm also gonna start listening to all them because I do feel like I mean, there was like right when it first in January, I did do like a big breakdown of like what the Department of Education does and what are the three biggest sections of that and what does it really mean to get rid of it. Um, which now that it's been a few months, I don't know if the information has kind of changed at all. Because like, what do you think about like, can they get rid of the Department of Education and what do you think like that would look like?
The information hasn't changed significantly since then. So there's two kind of threats to the Department of Ed. One is not a threat at all, but there's still the potential of the hubbub of it. So two different ways that are being threatened. One is that Representative Thomas Massey, who is from my home state of Kentucky, has filed a bill that has requested that the Department of Education be completely eliminated by December 26th of 2026. So, 18, 20 months from now. Um, he filed that exact same bill in the first Trump administration. It didn't get much traction. And there was a very similar bill that went through the House last year, and it didn't get enough votes. Every Democrat voted against it, as well as several Republicans. Um, that bill would need a supermajority, so it would need 60 votes in the Senate, and it's not looking like it would get 60 votes in the Senate. The Department of Ed is organized by statute, and so in order to dismantle it, you need that super majority.
Hmm.
Um, so it's looking like that, would be unlikely. The other threat is that President Trump has indicated that he would write an executive order trying to dismantle the Department of Education. And as recently, so we're recording this on March 17th, and things are going fairly quickly. But as recently as last week, he said that order was like coming together or something, and we could expect for it to come out soon. So, first of all, if he tries to do that, we would expect a lot of litigation around it, which is just going to be a lot of hubbub. As my husband said this morning at breakfast, that would be a very lucrative job to be, like a litigation counsel for the White House right now, because so much of this stuff is going to get stuck in the court system. But by and large, like not by and large, unequivocally, the Department of Education cannot be eliminated by executive order. So that's a hard no, can't be done. However, what we are seeing is that President Trump and his cabinet, largely through DOGE, that office that he established, the Department of Government Efficiency, that's the one that's run by, oh, that's fun. It did a thumbs up because I
Yeah.
gesticulated and then a thumbs up came up.
There's a few
Um,
fun things you can do.
I'm gonna try. Somehow, you can do balloons. Did you
Yeah.
know that? Like,
Yeah.
I think if you like get real excited, balloons come.
There's, I don't know, mine has kind of stopped doing it, but oh, yeah, peace sign got confetti, hearts does
This is
stuff.
fun. Okay. Oh, I love you makes hearts. Oh
Well,
my
I did a heart,
gosh.
like a heart
This
hand.
is, oh, like a Swiftie.
Yes.
Okay, I
And
love
then
it.
this is
Okay.
like, it makes it rock and roll.
I
There it
like to
is.
rock and roll. That's from Austin Alley.
You gotta put
Um,
your thumb in. Okay. Sorry, we got
okay, okay,
distracted.
okay.
Videos.
So Doge, again,
Yeah.
it's easy to get distracted because this is not super fun to talk about. But Doge, so the Department of Government Efficiency has already taken a lot of action. So while the Department of Education can't be eliminated by executive order, the policies of the executive branch can really impact the Department of Education. And in my opinion, that would have a global negative effect on the special education community. So, things that we're seeing already is the controlling of funding and staffing. So one thing, for example, and we can get into any of these depending on how much deeper you want to get, but um, last week, in the middle of the week, I don't remember which day, I think it was Monday, actually, the Trump administration cut the staffing in the Department of Education by and large by 50%. 50% of people were asked not to come to work on Monday or Tuesday of last week. Um, Very, very significant. So they can't eliminate the Department of Ed, but they can really reduce the amount of work that they get done by just getting rid of people. An example of how they can impact staffing is um, there's a lot of research that happens in government agencies, right? Like, if you just look at this from a business standpoint, when Congress makes laws, they want to see what their return on investment is.
Mm.
They authorize billions of dollars to be spent in the Department of Ed. So they want data to say how things are going. If they say, yeah, we're going to give $500,000 to this initiative, they want some data on how the initiative goes. And so there are these research arms, one research arm with a bunch of different agencies that research things about educational practice and inclusivity and how we're treating minority populations and all of these like really specific initiatives. And they like gutted that research arm, which is really problematic from a statutory standpoint because we have laws that say that, states have to report back, like as simple as it is. At the very beginning of Part B of IDEA, there are two sections. I think it's 1412 and 1413, or it's 13 and 14, which indicate that in order for states to be eligible for government funding and in order for local education agencies to be eligible for federal funding, they've got to report back specific information to the Department of Ed. And if they can't do that because the research arm is gone and that data collection mechanism is gone, then we what happens to the funding? It's
Yeah.
a big, huge question mark.
And so do you have like an idea what happens or a guess, a
I
hypothesis?
mean, it's going to get stuck in the court system. Like if there's any solace that we can find, it is how slowly the courts typically work. Because what'll happen then is um like from a research standpoint, let's say that, a state, just pick a state, I don't care, like California has a big grant for reading. I don't know if they do or don't, but let's say they've got a big grant from the federal government for reading, and they say, we're going to give you these 15 data points back to the federal government in order to get our grant next year. Well, if they can't, if there's no place to report those data points, then what happens to the funding? Like, then the
Yeah.
federal government can say, well, we're not going to give you your $500,000 because we don't have your data points. And they're like, yeah, we send it to an email address or to a website that doesn't exist anymore because that entire department's been shut down. Um, so, there's going to be all of these like holes in processes where stuff like literally has to go into the abyss. Um, and it's complicated. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I think that they could have said, well, we're going to eliminate this entire department and we're going to do a control find in the law and see where that department is, because the departments don't necessarily end up in the law too many places or even in the regulations, right? Like it is a very bureaucratic system. And I think that if you really look at the Trump administration's agenda, it is to get rid of some of that bureaucracy, which, I think everybody would say, yes, the government's too bureaucratic. But to come in with a chainsaw, it
Yeah.
is as Elon Musk shows up on stages oftentimes with, and completely eliminate things with it appearing with what appears to be very little foresight, is likely to cause a lot more rigmarole in litigation as my dad would say, grief, crap, and aggravation than what is necessary. And the sad thing is that it's America's children that are at the heart of that.
Yeah. Yeah, my partner has his theory of all this is that they're basically trying to make these like government entities like look bad. And so people are like, well, then why are we putting money towards the Department of Education? Or like, how about someone else leads it or something like, and basically like privatize things. Which I do remember his first term, like Betsy DeVos was the person in Secretary of Education.
Yes.
That
Yes, she was.
and and she was like very big on private schools and I just kept thinking like I don't know. I don't even really know if I could say that it's only Trump that has made private schools more. I mean, I feel like this might be a different conversation, but like privatizing things, I do feel like because like we're about to start public school, my kids, and we are like we have had people ask us if we're going to go private. And I was like, why would I go private? Like I was a public school teacher. I sub in the public school system. I trust that the system is gonna like I'm trusting the system. I'm trusting that I can still be a part of that system and like I like, I want to still support it. And so yeah, it's been interesting hearing that like that's my husband's theory is that that Trump is trying to
I
privatize
mean,
everything.
yeah, I don't necessarily think that's even theory anymore. That is an articulated goal of this administration. So another thing that they can do, like we said, they can't eliminate the Department of Ed by executive order. They need Congress, but they can control funding and staffing. Another thing that they can do is they can move departments.
Mhm.
And so what they are suggesting is that they move the OCR, the Office of Civil Rights, to the Department of Justice entirely. That would have a ginormous impact. So, the off and by the way, first of all, they've done a lot within the Office of Civil Rights already. So, we've got some executive orders that have to do with gender ideology and kind of this like anti-DEI ideology across the board.
Mhm.
And so what the Trump so the Office of Civil Rights that's within the Department of Ed, what it has traditionally done is it has protected students against discrimination in schools. So it has handled bullying cases. It has handled cases where students are discriminated on the basis of several protected classes, such as disability, gender, race, religious affiliation, even affiliation with the Girl Scouts, or at least with the Boy Scouts. I think also the Girl Scouts. I keep meaning to look that up because I keep having to say that one as like an interesting class. Um, and so like the OCR's made a complete 180 since Trump took office. And they are now opening investigations against states to promote President Trump's anti DEI initiatives, and they're relying on these executive orders to do that. So they're opening investigations against like state high school athletic associations that allow students to participate in sports based on their gender identity as opposed to their gender that was assigned at birth. They are opening cases against universities that have gender inclusive bathrooms. And they are going to states and saying, hey, if you don't stop this inclusive action, we're going to take away your funding. And we're seeing that happen more and more often. So the OCR is already doing all this other stuff. And then they're saying, in fact, we want to move the OCR over to the United States Department of Justice, take it out of the Department of Ed entirely, and pick it up and move it over to the Department of Justice. So what's interesting is the Department of Justice hasn't done that in at least years, right? The Department of Ed was um, initiated long time ago. So they at least haven't done that in a very long time, which would slow it down because they have to figure out how to do it. So
Yeah.
the protection of student civil rights would happen at a much slower pace, and it would also become more politicized and arguably less funded.
And
In
would it be
addition to
like
that,
less inclusive? I mean, like that, it sounds
sure.
like instead of fighting for kids to have the right to go to the bathroom in the place they want to go, where they identify, they're like taking that option away. Like it,
Yes, without a doubt. In inclusion, we think about the big problem is that um, by and large, the Republicans or Trump's administration at least is so anti-trans community and anti-LGBTQ plus community. But people with disabilities are in protected classes with people in those communities. And so then the spinoff on the disability community is significant. So,
yeah,
it's like we always say, if we could disentangle some of these protections, then we could handle the ideologies together. But in fact, like if we just kind of like broaden the lens to humanity,
yeah,
it's really sad. It's really sad what's happening. And then, like the objective things that would happen. So, when the OCR comes in, they do these school compliance reviews. So those would undoubtedly get slowed down and reduced in volume if we move it over to an entirely different place. And in addition to that, the federal DOJ has traditionally focused on litigation as opposed to administrative review. And so rather than calling up the OCR and saying, hey, we see discrimination, filing a 1 page or a 5 page complaint, parents would likely now have to actually file a lawsuit because the DOJ is litigation oriented. And that would have significant impact. I mean, who knows what would happen to their investigations and that sort of thing. So, reprioritization, less funding, more litigation, um, and everything happening at a much slower pace. That's significant. So
yeah,
that's number one. But then to get to the issue that you talked about with these block grants and privatization of schooling. So basically, another like we're still in this subcategory of they can reduce funding, they can reduce staffing, and they can move schools to they can move departments to different places. So the other idea is to move the Department of Ed's other things, like enforcement of IDEA, for example, over to a different government agency called Health and Human Services. And that's the agency that RFK Jr. is running. Dangerous all in of itself because RFK Jr. has said some things relative to treatment
hmm
of autism, even the development of autism or the cause of autism, whatever you want to call it. Um, Immunizations, all of those things, even access to medication. He said some things that are pretty contrary to what the disability community believes by and large. But then what would happen is schools would move with these no strings block grants. And what no strings block grants would mean is that states wouldn't be required to use federal funding on special education. They could use that money to go to private schools. So kids would go to private schools and the funding would go from the federal government to the schools, which would in turn take money away from special education and public schools. So obviously that could lead to unequal distribution of funds. It could lead to lower funding in special education services altogether, especially in underfunded states, like states that are already underfunded, and obviously weaker enforcement of the IDEA provisions in private schools, certainly, but also in public schools. So kind of like this less accountability thing,
yeah,
and then drawing money out of our public schools. From a colloquial standpoint, the other problem with privatization of schools on the disability community is like inclusion. So what happens if we do these block grants is that private schools and public schools, frankly, are like, they all kind of choose a niche. So we're going to become the school that does a really good job at STEM, and we're going to become the school that does a really good job at creative and performing arts, and we're going to become the math college prep school. and we're going to train America's future doctors. And we become this like specialized place, right? Well, then we still have our neighborhood schools because they're going to exist. And so the people that are left in neighborhood schools are kids who don't get accepted to the other schools, including a lot of kids with disabilities, and also kids whose parents and communities don't help them to access the other schools. And so our public schools just become kind of like this like catch-all of, you know, the bottom, so to speak, like
Yeah.
the way we used to talk in education, the bottom, which is terrible
I
because
mean,
we
and I
know,
I
yeah,
kind of
go
feel like
you say
that
it.
is what's happening. I mean, I can see, and not even saying that like when I go into a school, I think that. It's more that like when I'm talking to parents and people, like how many people are like, I'm just homeschooling, or we're just going to send them to private school. Like we're not even going to deal with this mess. We're just going to go do that. But like to even do that, like that's a lot of privilege to be able to do that. And I mean, I think that is like I don't, I mean, because yeah, and I think it's a lot of like, I mean, it's going to be so individualized by like each community's own culture. Um, because I mean, I know that I personally, after Trump got elected, I started going to like my school board meetings, because I wanted to hear like what was happening in my public school system. Like my kids aren't even technically, I just enrolled one of my kids. And I was like, no, I want to know now. Like I'm not
Right.
I'm here. Like I'm here for public education. This is important for people to all have access to education. And like how can I support that we continue to be able to all learn together successfully? And and I mean, I keep encouraging people. I'm like, you and a lot of I mean, I don't know if a lot of school districts do this, but I mean, mine also puts like they have a Zoom, like you can watch it virtually every night. So if you can't even every night, every meeting. So if you can't go to the meeting, you still are able to like access the conversation. And I feel like there's a lot of Facebook groups where you can like get involved in your community and hear what other parents and teachers and people are talking about. So I feel like there are so many things that you could do because I know like looking at the broad, all of America can also feel extremely overwhelming because I'm like, what am I and all the way on the West Coast? Like, well, how am I going to help some like random school in South Carolina? Unless they like hire me like that, like it's kind of hard to like really support everyone. So I'm like, what can I do and see? Like, how can I help and like see a change or make sure that my voice is being heard in my community? Um, so I hope more people get involved that way. But
Yeah, I mean, and like the research, Kayla, is so clear. We desegregated schools in 1954 in Brown versus Board of Education. 1954. The threat of regression to pre-1954 is now significant. And that's scary. So the what we know is that the research indicates that inclusion works for all students. It works for disabled students and it works for their non-disabled peers. There is zero research that indicates that having students with disabilities in general education classes has a negative impact on anybody. There is research that indicates that it has a flat impact, and there is a
mhm,
lot of research, a very rich body of research that indicates that when disabled students are educated with their non-disabled peers, that the test results and the social emotional impact and the academic impact and the transition opportunities and so many other things are better. They are improved for students with disabilities, and they are also improved for their non-disabled peers. That's where the majority of the research lies. But there's no research that indicates the counter of that, only flat. So I think that's really, really important. And so if we are taking all of the general education population, or even 60% of the general education population, and we are moving that elsewhere to private schools or to public schools that have this very specialized, like magnet type feel, then we are getting rid of inclusion because it's kind of like inclusion by like lack of inclusion by reverse elimination or something like that. We're just kicking people out of school, which makes our schools less diverse, which then makes them feel far less inclusive. So, we're going against research and we're going against history. We
Hmm.
desegregated schools in 1954. Super significant.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
man,
scary.
it is. I mean, it's so as I have been saying, I've been subbing in a lot of different schools and stuff, just kind of like, you know, getting back out there, seeing what's out there for education. And I kind of wanted to see, I mean, part of it was like to have some sort of income, but the other part was that I was like, I want to see what's happening in classrooms now because I'm coming in as like an observer and I wanted to see. Because and how many teachers comment on my videos where they're just like, kids just are misbehaving so much these days. They're just trying to put these kids with huge behaviors in my classroom and like no support. And so now I'm going in as a substitute. So I have no relationship with these kids. Like they
Right.
barely know my name. I don't know any of their names, and I'm only there for a day. And it has been really interesting to see also because my district, I would kind of say my state is like pretty for inclusion. Like,
Hmm.
and I know my district, I don't think they even have special ed classrooms. They're there as like sensory rooms for like people, anyone can go and use them. But there is still pushback from teachers, because and I think it's kind of that, um, like shift of mindset of like what is the goal for school? Like, because a
Hmm.
lot of people are so focused on like the testing and like, how are we going to make sure the school looks good that we're like doing better in testing, where it's like I think that has been really detrimental to just like teachers like feeling successful. Because actually the last substituting job I had, I was like going into different classrooms so the teachers could go and observe other, like it was like I was moving around. And so I got to meet the teachers and I got to see the teachers with their kids. And I would just be like, wow, this is such a great community. Like, you guys have such a great relationship. Like, the kids are working so hard. Like, and I was saying this, and almost every teacher was like, well, I mean, as hard as they will. Like, there was such like this like negative feeling that they like, because the students weren't perfectly understanding all of the information that they were feeling
Or
down
looking
about
like they
their
were
own
attending to
teaching.
something, even
Yeah,
if
and
they
I
weren't.
was like,
Yeah.
"No, are you kidding me? Like you're doing so much." Like, and I think that positivity just is like really hard to find. I think, people like feeling like that they can relate on hating something, but at times I'm like, "No, you guys, the education system is doing great stuff." Well, it can be. And we're all doing great stuff, and people need to like remember to celebrate those like I mean so I feel like that's trending so much where it's like celebrate small wins, like celebrate those tiny
Right.
things, but like I just don't I think down to people's core that's like not always being felt. And with all the scary stuff happening politically and with like the Department of Education changing and all these things that are like supporting minority groups, I just think it's like harder to remind ourselves like where those like glimmers of hope are or like how we can make positive change still.
Well,
But I think
I
being
think that's,
educated is really important. And you are educating
well,
me a lot today.
I think that you raise a really important point. I'm happy to educate you and your audience, from my perspective. But I think you raise a really important point that I'm going to put on my advocacy hat for a second, because, I work as a special education attorney in Kentucky and I work as an advocate in almost all 49 other states. And um, one thing that I will say is this. So, when you are a teacher, and you know this very well, Kayla, you and I have talked about this in other discussions. You have no idea what the interest and values of that student's team is. So their therapists, their parents, their grandparents, their religious leaders, their future employers, right? And so if you look at the purpose of IDEA, the federal law that gives us most of our information about educating kids with disabilities in school, what it says the purpose is to prepare students for further education, employment, and independent living. So, all of school, all of special education, not all of school, but when they're in special education, we should be preparing them for future education, employment, and independent living. And that has a ginormous component to it that schools oftentimes miss, and that is, what are the families plan to do? Right?
Hmm.
So if we've got a child with dyslexia that really struggles to read, do we are we expecting them to go to college? Are we expecting them to go to trade school? Or are we of the mentality, and this is an okay mentality, that, well, they can't read, so they can't do much of anything, right? Like all of those mentalities are okay because they are unique to yourself. And so I have a child with Down syndrome, and the Down syndrome community, what people do for work is very largely varied, and not as much tied to aptitude, whether it's, your adaptive skills or your academic skills or your activities of daily living performance. They're more tied to family values. So am I preparing for my child to go to college or a college program? Am I preparing for my child to work in like a big industry, like bagging groceries at the local grocery store? Am I preparing for my child to work in a small business in my community? Am I preparing for my child to ride in my car with me to and from work or to access public transportation? Am I preparing for my child to work in a sheltered workshop where they're sorting screws or stuffing envelopes all day long, day in and day out, and taking the bus back and forth? Or am I prepared for my child to be in my basement listening to YouTube for 8 hours a day? You know, those, all of those things are okay, right? Like if we look at all those things with zero judgment, you might say, that's not for me, or that's not for me. That's totally fine. But all of those things are possibilities and things that are occurring very, very frequently in the Down syndrome community and in the greater IDD community. Schools and teachers and administrators and all of the people on your IEP team need to know where you are in that mentality, right?
Hmm.
Where are you preparing for future education, employment, and independent living? Because we the breadth of possibilities is so significant that there could just be a ginormous like um lapse in communication. And so we might be saying, yes, this is wholly inclusive when it doesn't really match what we're looking for. So the whole idea here is there's no special education room in the real world. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I actually feel like I have so many opinions and things. I guess what I will say is I have worked on and I can't seem to remember what it was called, but I did work a lot with the deafblind service in the two deafblind organizations I worked with transitioning out of the public school system into independent living. Like what is gonna or what is your version of independent living? And we did these meetings where they weren't an IEP meeting, but it was a meeting with people in their community talking about, what are the students' like strengths and interests and things that we know that they don't like. Um, and we would have the student there advocating for themselves however they could. Um, and really trying to focus on like how can we get them to that next step, because a lot of times in the public school system we would meet students who were like 20, 21, about to be out, and sometimes we'd be like, okay, so when's their last day of school? Like, is it the day they turn 21 or 22, or do they get to finish out that school year? Like, do they get to go to the summer program? And like even that question, people would be like, "Oh, I guess I don't know when his last day of school is." And it's like,
Yeah,
okay, so that's like coming up. Like, do you like
right,
where are you going to go after that? And like, you're supposed to be planning this years before if they stay in the public school system till 2021
right.
and or 22, birth to 22. I don't know. See, I feel
It's
like it's
it's
kind of different.
your 22nd birthday under federal law.
Yeah.
So the
Okay.
end of your 21st year.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
what if you turn 21 in October? Like, is that it, and it was just like those, or 22, geez. So it's interesting to because that is something that it's like, my standards or my expectations for like me or even my family could be different and that's okay, which
Yes.
I feel like that's a really important thing to say. That it's like not every person needs to come out and have a full-time job and huge groups of friends and, doing these things like, like what do they want to do? What is like a family, I don't know, norm? Like what that all of that plays such an important role. Um, Thank you so much. I feel like we have so much more to say, but I do have to go parent my children that I can
Yes.
hear them screaming. But
That's important.
we're still going to throw this in here. I do Mystic Cat's tarot card reading at the end of every podcast episode. So we're going to do it still.
Yes. Let's do it.
Josh hasn't texted me yet saying that I need to be downstairs. So I'm just assuming everyone's fine.
They're alive.
They are.
Yes.
But yes, the kids are okay. Hopefully he remembered to put them in green. If not, I'm going to be running down with shirts.
And pinch them.
Yes, first I will
Yeah.
pinch the crap out of everyone in my family while I'm wearing my green romper. Okay, so usually it's a question. It could be like any sort of question that you want. Some people have been very specific. Some people are like, how's my week gonna go? How's my year gonna go? How's my
Okay.
job gonna go? What would you like to ask?
Oh my
And yes, you have to
gosh.
ask it out loud
Oh man.
so
So
everyone can judge you.
okay. How is my meeting gonna go today for my client?
Ooh, okay. Now tell me when to stop shuffling. Oh,
Stop.
it's okay. And I was kind of doing it under the camera. Okay,
I can see.
here we go. Whoa, the Hanged Man. Oh my
Is
gosh.
that bad?
I don't know yet. The Hanged Man. It's a little cat hanging upside down. Um, the cat looks like a little silly. So let's see. Oh, you know what? This is actually one I don't know the answer to. I've been doing better at like learning the different cards,
Oh no, I'm scared.
but this one is like, what number is this? Here we go. I'm also afraid, but I will not show that. The hanged man thinks he's stuck in the string forever. If he just stopped squirming, he'd realize that he's just experiencing a new way to play. Take a
Okay.
pause from your actions, look at things with new eyes before moving forward. The upside down time is needed for reflection before you can take the next step. Does that work?
Sure.
I
That's better
mean,
than, you're gonna
like
have to find a new
dying.
school and move to a new state or something. So,
Yeah. No, that just feels like you have to rethink. You feel like there's something that really needs to happen, but let's sit in this limbo for a little bit and figure out where
can
we're
you
gonna go
picture
next.
me? I gotta go too, but can you picture me at an IEP meeting saying, "You guys, this morning I had my cat tarot card read, and what we have to do is we have to be playful, and then we have to think about this from a new lens."
Please, if you do that, can you record yourself talking to them like on the side? I would I would love that so much. I would love to be in an IEP meeting with you. I feel like it would be fun. Or I'm assuming you make them super fun.
I mean, you have to have a good time
You come
sometimes,
in first with the song. Like,
I
hey,
always
everyone.
start them with a song. I usually walk in with like, I'm walking on sunshine.
And I can't even imagine. You said, wait, did you do hot yoga this morning?
No, no, that's
Oh,
why I don't
I
sound
can't
so
even
good.
imagine how much more angelic your voice would be
Angelic.
after hot yoga.
That's the right word. I mean, it's a delight and a pleasure for everyone in my presence after
It
hot
really
yoga.
is.
Hmm?
Oh my
They
gosh.
are probably happy I'm gonna arrive
They
today.
I'm happy every time I get to see your face. Truly. Ashley, thank you so much for educating me and everyone who is listening today because I feel like I am like so pumped to like do the next step basically, like to just keep going. I feel like this was very like uplifting and educational to like know what's happening and know what I want to do next. So
Ah. Well,
really.
good.
I
So
appreciate
I'm
it.
posting, and thank you. Thank you for having me on to talk about this. I feel the same way about you. I'm always so happy to be around you. I am posting these updates a lot on social media. My handle
Oh,
on
yes.
Instagram is at the collaborative IEP. And on the podcast, we've got a special series. When this goes live, we will probably still be talking about the inclusion document that the Department of Ed issued right at the end of the Biden administration. I'm doing a two-part episode on that, and that is an incredible, helpful document that we can use in our IEP meetings every day. So that'll be out. And then next, we're going to talk about that 504 case in that special series. So good stuff happening.
That's great. I'll put everything in the show notes too, so everyone can easily find you.
Yay.
Wow. Thank you so much. And I hope you have just a
Thank you.
lovely day.
Thank you. You too, friend.
Thank you, everyone thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Ashley Barlow, for taking the time out of your day to come talk to me, and to all you listeners. Um, if you have any questions or want to connect with Ashley, her podcast and her Instagram handle, her email are all going to be down in the show notes. And thank you so much for being here. I'm excited for next week because why wouldn't I be? We're always excited. Celebrate small wins. Okay, I'm done. I'm tired. I'll talk to you guys all later. Inclusion starts with you, and I just want to help. Bye.